The Catholic Church, for every Sunday, chooses very wisely the first reading in such a way that holds a profound connection with the gospel. Today's first reading was from the book of Isaiah. So the question becomes, what relationship is there between the first reading and today's gospel? Because at surface level, it could appear that there is no real relationship between Isaiah and the vocation of Peter, because when you think about it, first of all, they're 500 years apart, or even more than 500 years apart. So certainly there's no connection, at least in time. You could also say there's no geographic connection either. The first scene of Isaiah happens in the Temple of Jerusalem. The vocation of Peter happens in the Sea of Galilee, so very different places. Another difference is that Isaiah was a great writer and intellectual, and his book is really amazing. Simon was a fisherman. So being 500 years apart in different locations with different characters, what is the overlap between the two scenes? And yes, 3 things overlap between the two of them. The first thing in common between the two readings is that Isaiah and Peter, both of them have an overwhelming experience of the presence of God. Both of them have an overwhelming and fascinating and wondrous experience of encountering God's presence. Think about it. Isaiah is in the temple, and the reading says, he saw the Lord filling the temple, and the angels, the seraphims, singing, "Holy, holy, holy." Imagine how overwhelming this experience is, that Moses said, nobody can see God and survive. And when people saw the angels, they thought they were so beautiful that they were God themselves. So Isaiah not only saw God, he saw God and the angels. Think about Peter. He was a professional fisherman. He knew probably almost everything there was to know about his job. But suddenly, one day at noon, when it's very unlikely to fish anything, he witnesses the greatest catch of fish ever. The text in the gospel says Peter was overwhelmed, even kind of scared because of what he saw. So the first thing where they coincide is that Isaiah and Peter, they both have an overwhelming, wondrous, fascinating experience of the presence of God. They also resemble because their reaction to this vision is exactly the same. Do you remember the words of Isaiah? He says, I am a man of impure lips. In other words, he's saying, I'm a sinner. I'm not worthy of this experience. Do you remember the words of Peter? He says, stay away from me, Lord, because I am a sinner. So first step is they encounter God's greatness. Second step is they immediately recognize themselves as sinners. And you know why this happens? Because the more you see the light of God, the more evident your own sins become. Because the light that comes from God shines upon your own imperfections. And that's why sometimes when a person says, I really don't know what to confess, and I don't have much to confess, what we could speculate is that perhaps this person needs a little of God's light shining into his own life. And what's the third step? So they have the fascinating experience. They recognize themselves as sinners, unworthy of that experience. What's the third and last step? Isaiah hears a voice that says, who shall I send? Who shall be sent forth in a mission? What does Isaiah respond? He says, here I am, Lord. What about Peter? Jesus says, Peter, from now on you will be fisher of men. So the 3 steps present in both readings is vision, recognition of sinfulness, sent to a new mission. You start a new way. You start a new road in life. Those are the 3 steps that resemble and overlap in the 2 readings. And I want to share with you an experience from my own life. An experience that happened to me less than a year ago. In June of last year, I had the great privilege and chance of leading a mission trip to Peru. And we took like 30 kids from California, South Dakota, and also from St. Paul. And some of the kids were under 18, so they were minors. So I remember that the first day that I was in Peru, we were praying together, and suddenly I started getting scared. And I said, wow, I'm responsible of minors here in Peru. And I said, if something happens to these minors, I'm going to be responsible. And I started to think, I don't want to go to jail. And I was thinking, would I be able to minister to people in jail? But I had some consolation in that moment of prayer, and I heard the Lord saying, I'm the one who put this mission together, you're only my instrument. And then the last day, this happened. We went to downtown Lima, and we had only a couple of hours in downtown Lima. And downtown Lima is beautiful because we have very old churches from when the Spaniards first came to Peru. So our plan was, we're going to visit the cathedral, we're going to visit the Church of St. Rose of Lima, and we're going to visit the Church of St. Martin de Porres. That was the plan. So we went to the cathedral, and the cathedral was too expensive to go in. So I said, okay, let's go to the next place. We went to St. Rose of Lima, and we were there, and we got to pray with St. Rose. And then we went to St. Martin de Porres, and St. Martin de Porres was closed. So I said, okay, we got like 45 minutes. Now what do we do? And somebody said, we thought, why don't we go and visit the Jesuit church in Peru? The Jesuit church in Peru is called St. Peter. It's an old church, and it's especially significant for us Pro Ecclesia Santa members because our founder, Father Menor, lived for many years in that church. And I remember growing up in PES, listening that Father Menor lived in St. Peter, and when there was the procession of the Sacred Heart, when Father Menor was too old, he would follow the procession from the window of his room that looked into the church. So we were walking to St. Peter, to the church of the Jesuits in downtown Lima, and we were there with Father Humberto, who used to be the pastor at this church. And Father Humberto suddenly stood up in a bench and started telling the story about Father Menor. And in that moment, out of the church of St. Peter, the procession of the Sacred Heart started to come out of the church of St. Peter. And I had no idea that at that exact moment when we were going to St. Peter, the procession of the Sacred Heart was coming out. And you have to understand, for PES, our main devotion is the Sacred Heart. So I remember looking the procession of the Sacred Heart coming out of St. Peter, and all of my arms, they got like goosebumps. And I said, and I thought to myself, even if I had planned this out, this wouldn't have worked as great as it worked out because the timing was perfect. So we went into the church of St. Peter, and the procession was coming out, and a group of Jesuits was walking after the image of the Sacred Heart. And a group of Jesuits there, they didn't look Peruvian. And they were looking at us because they looked like gringos. And they were looking at us. And not me, but the rest of us, we were gringos too. So the Jesuits were kind of looking at us, and we were looking at them. And one of the Jesuits said, where are you from? And the kid said, we're from St. Paul. And they said, we're the Jesuits from St. Paul. So that beautiful moment, I know that it doesn't sound so great of a coincidence, but for me, it was a God moment. It was a moment where the Lord was telling me, the Sacred Heart is with you. So this is what happened to me. I had a God moment. I felt unworthy of it because I said, Lord, in spite of all my miseries and failures, you still let me know that you're with me. And you know what was my mission? I said, I know from this experience that I have to be an apostle of the Sacred Heart. So let me finish with this. We can't choose and we can't force to have God experiences. That's something that's beyond our control. But you know what we can control? We can control the attitude of always being in wonder. I think that one of the temptations that we feel is that we get used to things. Coming to Mass becomes a routine. Praying becomes a routine. Going to the Blessed Sacrament can become a routine. Going to confession can become a routine. So if I had to give you a takeaway from today's reading, an encouragement, a challenge, I would say, brothers and sisters, let us keep the same attitude of wonder and amazement of Peter and Isaiah. Let us never be bored of the great things that the Catholic Church offers us. Let us be always amazed at the Mass. And let us today, if we come to communion, or even if we just come to receive a blessing because we're not ready for communion, let us receive communion with the same wonder. Because remember, wonder helps us see our sins. And whenever we see our sins, we're more led to fulfill the mission that we're called to do.